today and secure your spot.
And now back to Matthew Hatfield and that evil basketball coach. Blast you, Ed Young!
Yes, the evil basketball coach accompanies me, Ed Young. Matt Hatfield here with him. We have a special guest with us, Curt Dudley, the longtime voice of James Madison University Athletics. You can follow him on Twitter, or the X as they call it now, at Curt Dudley, as we say good morning to him. Always a big matchup, always one that's looked forward to, my friend, when the Dukes and the Monarchs get together on any athletic surface, and today should be a fun one in the Royal Rivalry Challenge in football. How you been?
I've been very well, thank you. How you guys been?
We're doing
Kurt,
well.
good to see you, my man.
Ed's got a little more time on his hands now that he's not coaching at the moment. So he's into this JMU ODU football matchup today, and we'll break it down with you. But give me a sense, and my dad's a big JMU alum, class of 77. There's so many all across the 757, as you well know, Kurt. This team really opened eyes when they had that big win over North Carolina this year in Chapel Hill. My goodness, the offense was flowing. They haven't been quite as crisp lately here on the road in some matchups. Is this a dangerous spot for JMU today? Last year was a close game, 30-27 in Harrisonburg. What's the feel of the group, and is everything still in front of them in your eyes as far as having a really successful season?
Well, I think already that, first of all, thanks for having me here this morning. I think it has been a successful season, even though there's still the 3 games to be played, including today's. When you just look at what the program underwent, the major transition from Curt Dudley leaving right before the bowl game last year to trying to navigate that and playing Air Force in the Armed Forces Bowl, and then to have Coach Bob Chesney come in from Holy Cross and get the Dukes off to a good start, albeit it has been a little bit up and down, a roller coaster ride in terms of the offense is concerned, and you're absolutely correct. The Dukes have had some issues other than that one on the road at North Carolina, which you said opened eyes. My eyes were opened as wide as anybody's watching that one here from my home in Bridgewater. Didn't make the trip with the Dukes, nor have I made it today. But it has been successful just with all that transition. And even when you look at what's happening, this is part of the story this year. But when you even look and see what's happening in Indiana with all those former JMU players and the success that Curt Dudley has had. In fact, they just announced that he's been signed through 2032, a contract that's worth about $8 million per year with a $1 million retainer. So, I mean, it's just really unbelievable what he's done there. But here at James Madison, being 6-2, becoming bowl eligible just 7 games into the season, a lot helped him out from that regard. And, but today is a concern. You go into Old Dominion, you go into Norfolk, it will be a hostile environment. We know that, but that's what you want, actually. So it's good that Old Dominion and JMU are in the same league, because now we're getting one of those regional rivalries to be rekindled.
Absolutely, and you want to get bowl eligible if you're Old Dominion, sitting at 4-5 with some key games coming up with Marshall and on the road to Arkansas State. And Ed, how about JMU? 70 points on the board against UNC this year, against Mac Brown's Heels, and 53 before halftime, which was one of those games that had the whole college football universe buzzing that Saturday.
Yeah, it was just unbelievable. It was nothing that you could predict. Just there was a confluence of things that just happened. The ball bounced right. The football is shaped kind of oddly, so sometimes you don't know which direction it's going to go. But everything that day just worked and clicked for JMU. I think the Tar Heels were caught a little flat-footed in that event, and the Dukes just continued to pour it on. Now, had they played that game another 30 minutes, North Carolina might have caught them. But there was just too much distance between JMU and UNC at that time for that to come out. So certainly it was a monumental win. It was one of those eye-openers around the country. But as we said earlier, the Dukes have had their ups and downs, and we just don't know today. Last week they came off a bye. They performed well against Georgia State, and that the game against North Carolina also coming off a bye week. So you can see that the coaching staff has made some great adjustments and figured out a few things after some struggles. But here we're going into, the home stretch in that environment there in Norfolk.
Ed?
Well, Kurt, when you talk about great start, a lot of points, basketball scores, and then you mentioned earlier about the ups and downs, especially on the offensive end, new coaching staff. And of course, Signetti goes on to Indiana, and we all know what he's doing with the Hoosiers. It's got to be one of the big stories of the year, even though some pundits are saying, well, they're not playing the powerhouse teams of the Big Ten, fake record, all this and all that. But the bottom line is they're doing well. And obviously, some of the key guys at Indiana were some of the better players at Madison. So I got to think that here comes a new coach in. He's going to put his own system in. You got to go to that portal, okay, world famous portal, and you've got to make this work quickly because it's a quick way to get things really going. Signetti did it in Indiana, but maybe JMU is still kind of going through some molasses with their feet on offense. What would you say is that issue with the offense at Madison?
Well, I think, first of all, if you look at the last several years and the quarterback situation at JMU, with the going back even to when Everett Withers and this great run that James Madison has had on the gridiron over the last number of years, all of those quarterbacks that they had were experienced quarterbacks. They were juniors or seniors, transfers. When you look at Vad Lee, Ben DiNucci, McLeod last year, Todd Centeo 2 seasons ago. All those guys, and that was a big question mark what they were going to be able to do. And I think we also see that Tino Sinceri is a pretty darn good quarterback coach because he's doing the same thing at Indiana as he left to go with Coach Signetti. But so I think one of the things is it's some growing pains. I've always liked Alonzo Barnett III out of North Carolina. I've liked him since he stepped on campus. I thought that once he got a chance, that he would be good. And his story last year, you may recall, is that he was the starting quarterback under Signetti going into the season. Bucknell was in town, and he just was not loose. He was kind of locked up a little bit, froze, if you would, and just did not perform well. He had like the deer in the headlight situation, and then McLeod takes over, and the Dukes just roll from there, and we know the rest of the story about last season. So this year, in fact, I was not at the Charlotte game, but I was doing a men's soccer match in Harrisonburg on ESPN Plus, and my broadcast partner and we were at the halftime, and I peeked over because the games were running simultaneously with JMU playing at Charlotte in football, and I looked at the early numbers, and Barnett was 1 for 6, and I looked at my partner, and I said, "Uh-oh, this sounds very similar to last year." But you can't really look at those numbers and make a quick assessment. You have to look back and see why he was 1 for 6. But the whole point here is that you still have a very inexperienced collegiate quarterback. Now he's gaining that experience because he's going to be starting again today. And sometimes he has looked really good, but because he is really in his first year of playing in live action on these Saturdays here in the fall, you're seeing some ups and downs with that a little bit. So I think that's one of the main issues. The offensive line has been good and intact. They've done something a little different this year, and you'll see a little bit of this today, but not as much because of injuries. Chris Smith is the offensive line coach, and you will see linemen rotate in almost like they're defensive linemen. What I mean by that is, that a good defensive line is probably going to have 7 to 8 guys deep that they're going to rotate throughout the course of the game. And typically, traditionally, you're going to see that offensive lineman, because of continuity, be the same group of 5 unless there's an injury here or there. Well, the Dukes don't do that. They will bring in other guys to rotate in. And that's paid off. The reason being is because they have a couple of guys that are hurt. And with them being out, they've got experienced players now to fit that role. So that was a little bit of, I think, some of that situation. And the other aspect is, I think that, and the coaches will tell you this, there have been situations where the coaches feel like they could have made better calls. They could have put the Dukes in better situations. And this is from the FBS level, this is a young football staff that overall too. Now, certain aspects of the game can transfer from one level to the other, no doubt. But there's a little bit of a learning curve, I think, with those guys too. And they've said themselves, well, we should have done this and we should have done that. So the continuity, and as you mentioned, Coach, you're throwing all these people together at one time. It takes a lot. It's not, you just can't throw water on it and then boom, instantaneously this is going to work. We see it all over the country, and I think that's one of the reasons that you see a lot of parity in the country right now, is because you just don't know. You can't even look at preseason polls because you don't know what those guys are going to do. They may look good on paper, but they never played together very much.
Kurt's great point, because when you back in the old days, you recruit high school kids, you're going to redshirt almost 99% of them. So you're going to have to go with what got better from the previous year. So you got a little bit more idea of what the team's going to be. Now, when you bring in all these transfers and are immediately eligible, it could be great and it could be a disaster. It just, if you don't know how to recruit the portal, you're in big trouble. So, and I'm not saying JMU didn't know how to recruit the portal. It's just how it's working out. Now let's flip it. Defensively, I understand JMU's tops in the country in turnover margin, which is a big statistic defensively. I happened to be at one game for Old Dominion this year live, and it was Georgia Southern. Matt was there too, and they destroyed them with a backup quarterback who I said, well, whoever the starter is, when he comes back, he better be ready, because this dude looked really good.
Not the backup anymore, Colton Joseph. He's really good now. Yep. So now I say to you, what are we going to see? Let's look at the defensive side. The rotation of linemen is key. That's something I'd do if I was a football coach. I'd rotate linemen like crazy. Hope the consistency stays there. Wear the other team down, because that line play is key. But let's move it over a little bit to the defensive side. What are we looking at today?
Well, you will see that, and I think that's an area that's gotten better. And one fellow to really keep an eye on is one of the ends, Eric O'Neill. O'Neill is a transfer. Came in from LIU, Long Island University, which is an FCS program, starting to make a little bit of noise at that level. But he's actually a pretty good example of the transfer portal from one level to an upper division level. When he came in, I'm not quite sure he had the overall confidence that he could play at that level. But through time and through basically the trust of the coaching staff, and Sam Daniels, who's he's a 757 product, our defensive line coach at JMU, played at JMU with Arthur Moats when the two of those guys were there in the late 2009-10, that era. And you talked to Eric just last week where he had a couple of sacks against Georgia State. He's now at the point in his mental aspect of the game of feeling like he can compete at this level. So you've got that part of it too. But yeah, you're going to see a number of defensive linemen that are going to roll through the entire ball game. And the other thing that I think when you speak to that is the second level of defense are the linebackers. And now last week, Jacob Dobbs, another transfer who is the tackling leader for JMU, sat out last week for precautionary measures. We should see him back in there at one of the middle linebacker situations, and they will rotate those fellas as well. So you're seeing guys that can go full bore at any particular time, and the backups have been good too. You used Taurus Jones last week because of Dobbs being out, so he ended up becoming the play caller from a defensive standpoint. And the defense has been good. Now, you can there's always a situation where you get a one-on-one situation, it breaks down and a guy can beat you over the top possibly, but that can happen to anybody. So I think that's an area that probably has been the most consistent week in and week out. If you had to compare and line up offensive consistency, defensive consistency, it's been on the defensive side of the ball where things have been a little bit more reliable.
Few more minutes with the one and only Curt Dudley, the longtime voice of James Madison University, our guest here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk on Cova Sports TV. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you're tuning in. We always appreciate the comments and feedback from you. JMU taking on Old Dominion today at SB Ballard Stadium in Norfolk, 4 o'clock kickoff on ESPNU. And our remaining minutes with you, Curt, we thank you for coming on. You mentioned one local player from the 757 in Taurus, TJ Jones, who hails from Norcom High in Portsmouth. Another one that's a big component on the offensive side of the ball is George Pettaway, the UNC transfer from Nansman Suffolk Academy. How crucial is the run game? We know about, big time football matchups, playoff time. running the ball, stopping the run. Old Dominion's a smidge better, it looks like, defensively defending the run than it is the pass. How much will the run game, especially in short yardage situations with Petaway and whoever's back there, be a key determining factor in this game today in your eyes?
Well, I think that's an area that's been hit a little bit by injuries. Petaway is certainly the number one back that the Dukes have to their disposal. Tyler Purdy, who was another transfer from Holy Cross, was really giving the Dukes a good short down runner, but he got hurt. He's out for the rest of the year. And that's an area. Petaway has been good the last several weeks, but it has been more of it hasn't been a dominant component of the game. I mean, you're not going to see him. I don't think he's going to necessarily break loose and run for a huge chunk during the day, 150, 170 yards. No, he could be close to 100 yards per contest, and that seems to be where the upward trend is working for him right now. He's getting that groove going a little bit more. But the other aspect of that is because of the other injuries, he's getting to handle the football a little bit more. So he's kind of taking some of those yardages, some of that yardage away. I would like to see the running game become a little bit more dependable, a little bit more aspect to establish that game, and that, in a sense, would give Alonzo Barnett the chance to really get into a comfort and a groove and a rhythm within the course of the game. So to me, that running game does have enough juice to it to do that. I'd like to see it a little bit more. I mean, I'd like to see it go from juice to, I don't know, something a little bit more explosive, I guess, all in all. So a smoothie maybe, you know. But it's an area that I think it has made some progress over the last several weeks, but it could be critical in today's game, quite obviously.
And Ed, 24 takeaways for the Dukes compared to 15 for the Monarchs. So that turnover margin, which you always talk about here on the program, these close games could certainly settle things.
Yeah, that's been an area that's been very good week in and week out. I mean, obviously, you can have one big game and turn that number really high. The North Carolina game helped to set the tone, I think, from that standpoint, getting a number of takeaways in that ball game, and they're getting 2 to 3, each week, and that's been a big difference. And I mentioned about Alonzo Barnett too. He's only thrown 2 interceptions. The last one that he threw was really not a wise decision. He just kind of threw it up for grabs in a pressured situation. The other came real early in the year. So even though he's still young, he's made some pretty good decisions and not thrown it to the opponent very often. So that's been crucial for JMU too.
Curt, in the past, we've known Old Dominion and JMU, especially under some of those former coaches, they have really good special team play, and where they get a lot of their turnover. Assess JMU on the special teams.
Well, that is an interesting area. We talk about the interception situation with James Madison, and a reason I bring that up is because their top Spence is their top defender from an interception standpoint. He's got 5 on the year. He also has a very unique capability of coming off the edge and blocking punts and blocking kicks. So that gives JMU a little bit of a plus at any particular time, that he can come off that edge and do that. Terrence Spence, another transfer to James Madison this past year. So see, Coach Young, that transfer portal has played a bit of a role here with the Dukes this year. So he's kind of key. And a transfer from Connecticut is your field goal kicker, Noah Ruelas. Ruelas has, I think, an NFL leg. He has one of the strongest legs I've seen, accuracy as well. But he missed the Coastal Carolina Thursday night game and 2 games after that. So he didn't show back up on the playing field until last week. So I'm not sure just if he's got his full 100% leg or not. He is very accurate. He does have the distance. And so that expands the field a little bit from that portion of, special teams play. And then you have Ryan Hansen, the punter. This guy, I think, also is an NFL prospect. He can directional punt. He can backspin the ball. He averages about 44 yards per kick. He can drop it inside the 20. He's a do-all everything as far as a punter is concerned. A pretty big guy for his size, for a punting fella. And so I like the special teams. I think that's been one of the crucial aspects of where the success has lied in this 6-2 record right now.
Well, it should be a lot of fun today as the Monarchs
Should be.
play host to the Dukes of James Madison University, JMU, entering this final 3 weeks of the regular season. You got 4 teams separated by a game in the Sun Belt East, and they played 2 of those 3 teams they're in contention with. Old Dominion trying to get a couple of wins to become bowl eligible yet again under Coach Ricky Ronnie. Always a pleasure. Curt Dudley, check him out online. He does great work. You can follow him on Twitter, the X at Curt Dudley. He's the voice for JMU, wearing all kinds of hats for various sports. Good to see you again and chat with you. Thanks for coming on. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll talk again soon.
Hey, always nice to chat with you guys down in my hometown area there in the 757.
That's right. Hey, before we let you go, for those who don't know, tell people you are from the 757. Give us the roots if you can.
Yeah, so I grew up in Norfolk, was born there, and grew up actually, I'm in the very corner of Norfolk. So if I'd have gone across across the railroad tracks, I would have gone to Kempsville. If I had stayed in town stayed in locally without the busing in the 70s, I would have been a Lake Taylor Titan. I was actually a Titan in middle school, or junior high. Basically, we call it middle school up here in the valley. They call it junior high down there, and then ended up going to Booker T. So I was a Booker, swam there, swam like a rock. Played baseball for Hank Maynard. Couldn't hit a curveball, so I went into broadcasting. So that's kind of, and came up here to go to school at Bridgewater College here, which I live in the town of Bridgewater now, but due to my roots, we just had our 45th high school reunion down there.
Awesome.
There, Waterside, back in early October. So, and I tell you what, there are a lot of my friends that I grew up and went to school and graduated from Booker T that are Old Dominion either fans or alums. So I hear from a lot of those folks, particularly during weeks like this, whether it's basketball or football. It's great because a lot of respect for everybody.
That's awesome. My dad and uncle live in the same house. My dad went to Booker T. Washington. My uncle went to Lake Taylor. And my dad's a JMU alum, and my uncle lives up in New York, jazz musician now. So it brings back some smiles to my face hearing some of the stories from their days in the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. So always good catching up with you, Curt. Enjoy the game today, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thank you very much. You guys have a great one.
All right, Curt. Thanks, Curt.
That is the one and only Curt Dudley with us here. JMU Old Dominion coming up later today. We've got some NFL picks coming your way. We'll finish